Well, good day to you. It is May the 30th, and I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you happen to be. Now, if this is your first time ever listening to Search for Signs, I would like to welcome you to this channel and introduce myself. My name is Gary Willing, and just tell you briefly about what we talk about. We talk about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. We talk about why are the Masters returning now to the everyday world. What, of course, does it mean, and why is it important that they do so at this particular time? And what does it mean for you? Now, it is not so important for you to look at this from a religious standpoint. In fact, actually, I want to just set something straight right away. I'm not trying to change your religious beliefs at all. I don't view this even as a religious channel, believe it or not. Even though I understand that from your point of view, this might look like I'm smacking in the face of your own beliefs. But it really is about the fact that we are one. As a people, we are one. Doesn't matter whether you're a Christian, doesn't matter whether you're atheist, doesn't matter you're white, black, Indian, Asian, doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, young or old, man or woman, doesn't matter. We are all one family living on this little planet called Earth, right? And it's time that we start to live our lives as close to moment as we possibly can with that in our mind. Help to manifest it. Of course, we're not living in a world really where that is truly manifesting perfectly, of course. We're all kind of living our own lives, competing against one another, fighting against one another for our own survival and so forth. And that's really why the teacher and these masters are coming back now to show us how to live as one family. And it's going to start really with one very simple thing. It's called the principle of sharing. And I hope you listen to this video all the way through, because I actually have an article that I'm going to read written by one of these masters entitled The Blueprint of Sharing. He addresses the immediate concerns that a lot of people have when they hear about that term, sharing, and also kind of lay out a little bit of a picture about how it could look if we start doing it and the benefits of it. Now, if you don't listen to this video all the way, I'll kind of give you the end and the beginning, so to speak. The teacher puts it like this: without sharing, there could be no justice, and without justice, there could be no peace, and without peace, there could be no future. So sooner or later, we're going to have to realize that we do need peace. And then how do we get there? Well, the only way to get there is really two easy steps: sharing, which will bring about justice, and then bring about peace. And then what? It will give us a future. So something to think about. If you don't think that we're one, or if you've heard it before and you're like, yeah, that's just a bunch of words, right? I actually think there's evidence that's proving to us that we are one. And it's coming in twofold, okay? So the first are the miracles that have been going on all around the world for decades. Healing waters, crosses of light, Hindu milk miracle, UFO sightings, crop circles, people being saved by accidents from angels and so forth, are just a very brief list of some of the miracles that have been happening in all walks of life to each and every one of the religious groups and in every country around the world. And they're leaving people with a greater sense of hope because the problems are mounting on a daily basis, right? Which we're going to talk about too, which I also think is teaching us that we are one in its own way. But it's giving everyone hope that's experiencing these miracles, that are seeing UFOs flying in the sky, perhaps, or being healed from a terminal illness by drinking the healing waters of Tlacote, Mexico, for instance. And if the hope is for all of mankind, if it's happening to every group, then it's true to say that the hope for mankind is for all of mankind, is what I meant to say, and not just for one particular religious group, and that kind of thing. And nobody can really claim ownership of it, because it's meant for the whole world, really. Now, if you look at the problems, and I'll just talk about this in just briefly, and then we'll get on into the video. The problems like the environment, social injustice, starvation, political instability, economic divisions, crime, that kind of thing, violence, terrorism, those problems that are facing humanity on a daily basis, whether they're affecting you personally or indirectly, are also teaching us that we are one, because we all have a responsibility. It's all affecting us, right? And we all have a responsibility to do something about it. Now, when it comes to the environment, when it comes to the principle of sharing, perhaps, which will bring about justice, which will bring about peace, I would say probably the best thing to do now for yourself is to start to educate yourself on some of these things. You don't have to believe me about what I'm saying about Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. You don't even have to believe me about the experiences when I talk about meeting Maitreya and talking with him and experiencing his wisdom and his love. I know for a fact that what I'm saying is true. You might not, and that's okay. This information is for you to consider for yourself to see if it's true or not. But it is my hope that you take a little bit broader view of this, a little more of an open mind, start to research in on some of these things, see that these miracles are happening, dive into the problems a little bit deeper than maybe you had looked at them, because now you're starting to see that it is a universal problem and it is showing us that we are one and perhaps doing something about it. So we need to do this together, and that's the real intention of this. Again, not to change your view, not to change your religious view. You don't have to start believing something differently than what you did just yesterday. It really is about looking at what we can do to solve the problems of the world. So hopefully you'll take this information from that regard, okay? All right, now let's get on into the video. And then most videos, I give a little brief introduction, and it's typically about the same thing, talking about the miracles and the problems and those kind of things. And then we discuss some of the questions. And I love questions because it helps to focus in on what we talk about on this channel. It helps us to understand a little bit more about this, perhaps. And you can post a question as a comment in this video or in other videos. You can email me at searchforscience@mail.com. That's another thing you can do. But if you don't want to ask questions, you just want to kind of find this information out on your own, well then shoot, just look at some of the links in the description of this video and start to do some investigation and some background work on this for yourself, okay? And then, like I said, if you come to the end and you see that it's true for you, that's wonderful. If not, then I'm impressed that you actually took it upon yourself to look at this a little bit more than you would and just not reject it outright. So, all right, now let's get on into the first question. It comes from Piera Spiso. If I'm not pronouncing that right, I do apologize. I'm awful at trying to pronounce names I'm not familiar with, and I don't mean any disrespect by it. It's just I've never been good at it. So anyway, in fact, it's the same thing with just regular words. If I'm not familiar with the word, it's very hard for me to pronounce it sometimes. I invite you to see this documentary, Gera Bandal, Only God Knows. It's about the messages of Mother Mary gave around 1962 to 1968. About grand events and miracles that will happen. I found that this prophecy are strictly related to Maitreya's prophecies. One prophecy said about a big warning for all of humanity that is described like a 2-star that will collide in the sky. Scientists are just predicting that same event will happen next year. Mother Mary said that the beginning will start in connection with a synod in the Vatican, and in connections of a Pope visit in Russia. Like you, I was convinced that Maitreya's emergence will happen this year, but after listening again this prophecy, I think that we will have to wait more. Now, the question is, do you know if Benjamin Creme ever suggested to keep a ration of food in your home and cash for some months? I'm a Satya Sai Baba devotee, and I know that my guru during a discourse said to make a habit of always food rationing and money cash needed for 6 months. Looking at what is happening now, China, and then talk about the crops being destroyed and so forth. Since 1 year, buying grains from around the world, Germany and other northern European countries warn the population to keep ration of food at home, etc. Everything suggests that it is wise to start to be concerned about and to start have a ration of money at home. Sorry for my poor English. It's okay. You are doing very well, relatively speaking, if this is your second language. Okay, so, Piera, first of all, I never said that Maitreya's emergence was going to happen this year. Maitreya's emergence actually has been going along for some time now. Now, if you mean in terms of the majority of us knowing for who he is and maybe perhaps the day of declaration and being known that way, I didn't really say I thought it was going to happen this year. I'm hoping, that'd be great. But, it really, the timing is not dependent upon what I think for sure. And really, I think it's not even dependent upon Maitreya and what he wants. because I'm sure he wants to start it as soon as possible too. It really depends on the free will of humanity. And until we start to see that we need to change our ways, not much can get done. So I think that's a part of it. Okay, now I am going to try to answer this a little bit more in the next question about what's going on in the Middle East in relative to Maitreya's emergence and so forth. So hopefully you'll listen to that. But now in terms of did I know if Benjamin Creme ever suggested home food rations and cash for some months? Somebody asked him that question some years ago, and he advised against it, saying it wasn't necessary, it was just fear, and there was no need to do it. There's plenty of food in the world, and there will always be plenty of food, and that's the problem. It's the fact that we're not distributing it right. Now, I know there's been some supply chain issues since COVID, for instance, and it might be wise to have maybe, a few extra days of food, perhaps, but I think 6 months might be a little excessive, because then you're kind of wasting food in the end. But, it's up to you. I mean, that's your choice, whatever you want to do. I just know he didn't suggest it. So hopefully that answers that question. Now, and then lastly, about the messages from the Madonna. Now, the master who was the Madonna is a great master in our hierarchy on our planet. She will not be coming into incarnation for a few hundred years from now. So she won't be one of the first group of masters to come out right after Maitreya declares himself as Maitreya, the one awaited by all the world's religions and so forth. She will wait for a while and then come into incarnation, but will be the first master to be a female. All the masters right now are in male bodies, and I haven't had this question asked in a while, but people usually ask, like, why are they always masters? Why are they always referring to humanity as men and so forth? Is it some kind of misogynistic thing? And it isn't. It's not a masculine order. It's just that the hierarchy of masters at this time, it's a very, very tiny, tiny group of masters. If you looked at it in terms of the billions of people in the world, of those of us living on this planet who are masters, it's just a few handfuls, really. In fact, actually, they could probably ride in a rather large van together, or a school bus, together. And that's it, out of all the people, out of the billions of people. So not very many. And they choose to be in male bodies only because it helps them to anchor the spiritual energy that they're manifesting easier. Female bodies have a different purpose. It's like, opposite poles of a magnet, so to speak. But in the future, more and more people will become masters, more and more people will be more advanced disciples, and then it'll be easier for these masters to, and not so necessary for them to anchor it in that way, and then they can become more and more female. And then eventually it's been said that in the coming time, it'll be about 50-50, really, roughly. Half female, half males, But in terms of the messages, let me just get back to the question, the statement at hand. Benjamin Creme's master always said that there were two very distinct, very different types of messages coming from so-called, the Madonna. And I don't mean so-called in terms of that rate. I just mean in terms of they may or may not be legitimate messages coming from this master is what I meant to say. You can really find, you have a stronger likelihood of it being more of a legitimate message if it's more of a hopeful message. If there's any kind of gloom and doom, destruction at a certain time, a cataclysmic event, chances are, and I'll put it like that, chances are they're not coming from the Madonna, master of the Madonna, who was the Madonna. They're coming from the person's subconscious who's giving the message. And there's no real validity to it, but it takes some discernment to kind of figure that out. Even so-called messages from Maitreya that people channel that talk about destruction and so forth, the masters don't talk like that. For one, one of the Benjamin Creme's master put it like this: fear and joy are equally infectious. So spreading fear, even if that was something that was going to happen, they don't do that because that would spread fear. It's like a disease, really. Now, Maitreya gives stern warnings that if we don't create peace, then eventually our destruction, we will be destroyed, or we'll destroy ourselves, right? And our future will end on this planet. But that's a little different than a cataclysmic event that will happen next year, that kind of stuff. That they don't really refer to it like that. It's all about hope. In fact, Maitreya himself has said in his messages, all will be well, all manner of things will be well. And he even talks about his emergence, that things are going according to plan, far sooner than he ever imagined it could happen, and that the response to humanity is quite well. So even from my point of view, when I think that the response from humanity is not well, they're not doing well, right? From his point of view, it is. So it's just a slow process because the planet is so big, and there's 7 billion people living on this planet. He's not just speaking to a tiny group of people in Palestine like he did 2,000 years ago. So you see what I'm saying? So just something to think about. But I do thank you for the question, and thank you for contributing to the conversation for sure. All right, so the next one. Have you been seeing these news articles the governments have been releasing in regards to unidentified aerial phenomena? It seems like the media has been talking more about them. Yes, I have. And it's quite interesting because I do think it's signs of the time that the eventual truth about these space brothers will become more and more mainstream. And the truth, the real truth that they are harmless and they're here on a spiritual mission will also eventually become mainstream knowledge. Now, it might take the masters coming out to point this fact out to us and this truth out to us. But, I even watched an interview with the former President Obama, who stopped short of actually saying that they were from another planet or another whatever, right? He was talking about the phenomena of these things, that he kind of said, well, we don't really know where they're coming from and this, that, and the other. But I do think that he knows. I think that Donald Trump knew, Biden probably knows now, and that kind of stuff. So they know. It's just they're holding back for a couple reasons, I think. They don't want to start a panic, but people are starting to kind of warm up to the idea more and more about these space brothers. But also, think about it. The governments of the world want to keep their power, and the individuals that run those governments definitely want to keep their power, right? So if they said the truth that these unidentified aerial phenomena were coming from none other than our higher planets like Venus and Mars, like George Adamski and Benjamin Creme said for years. And they mean us no harm. In fact, they're here to help us, and they're coming from a higher civilization that lives totally peacefully. They know no war. They don't have crime. There's no social injustice. There's no violence of any kind. They live harmlessly and all that kind of stuff. And they're here to help us. Who are we going to go and listen to? We're going to say, what? I don't need you anymore. We'll go listen to them, which eventually probably can happen. Not necessarily the space brothers themselves, but the masters even, right? But the form and function of governments today is backwards. They try to tell us what to do, and then the people just kind of go along with it reluctantly, right? And then there's this malaise that happens after a while where people just throw up their hands and say, I don't care anymore, right? You do whatever you want as long as I can come home, go to work, make my money, come home, nuke my supper, and then pass out on the bed or the couch, right? Then I'm fine, right? But really, what's going to happen is not only because of the knowledge of the space brothers, but because of these highly enlightened teachers called masters that are going to be inspiring and galvanizing humanity to wake up, right? We are going to now start telling the governments what to do. In fact, actually, Maitreya says that people power is going to be the most powerful force for good in the entire world. It's in what the world has even ever seen, really. And we will tell the governments what they need to do. And then the governments will say, okay, and not put up such a fight. Right now it's kind of like, we don't really care about you. So we just care about our donors and who gives us money and blah, 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 blah. And that's the problem. I hate to talk about politics, but it's true. That's that's what's keeping the world in the shape that it's in today, which is a piss poor shape, really. But like I said, if we knew about these space brothers, the truth of them, we would go talk to them even. You know what I mean? So I think that's part of the reason why somebody like Obama, who knew, You could tell he knew. You could see by his facial expressions, he knew that they meant us no harm. There was no fear when he was talking about them at all, right? But he stopped short of it because I think he even knew that if I tell them, they're not going to listen to us anymore. They're going to go to them, right? So anyway, just something to think about. But thank you. Next question. Do you think it is too late for Maitreya to come back? Absolutely not. In fact, actually, I'll keep it short, sweet, to the point. I think it's going to be just like in the movies when the damsel falls off the structure of the building or whatever, and she's about to hit the ground, and the hero, who's the superhero, swoops in and saves the day. I think it's going to be just like that. He knows what he's doing. Have no fear. I'm telling you, this guy knows what he's doing. The timing couldn't be better. And even though most of us have not recognized him on TV, the majority of us have probably already seen him on TV. He's just speaking so simply, so calmly, so relaxed, with not using this verbiage that I'm using, like without sharing, there could be no justice, without justice. I mean, he's using it in a different way to get his point across. He's very adept at doing that. But yet, even according to their own masters, Benjamin Creme's master, it is having a profound effect on the people who are hearing him. And he will wake us up in time before we go right off the cliff. But we're close. We don't have a lot of time left. But yeah, he'll do it. I'm not worried about it. And he's not going to give up and just say, screw it. All right, but thank you for that. All right, so the last question before I read the article. I have a question about the recent events in Israel. Is it going to escalate to a third world war? No, it's not. But it's a precarious thing. This is a reason why we need peace, because any skirmish anywhere in the world, according to the masters, it could even be in Central or South America, it could be in Africa, for instance, or Asia, could escalate to where all the nations are involved, and then eventually nuclear arsenals will be used and so forth, and it will end all life on the planet. That's the danger. Does it mean that there won't ever be a third world war? No, not until the principle of sharing takes place. Once the principle of sharing takes place and starts to take root, we can pretty much kiss a third world war goodbye forever, but not until then. So now I want to say this before I read the article. I've been around the block when it comes to this information long enough, and had, read a lot of Benjamin Creme's masters' articles and so forth, even talking with Benjamin Creme personally about certain things, that there were times throughout the last few decades that Maitreya could have taken a closer approach to humanity, whether it was his first interview, for instance, which should have happened in the early 80s, and then there were other times where things were looking really good and his approach was going to get closer, and then an event happened, and then it consumed the population's news media and so forth, and totally distracted the news, and pushed his timing back farther and farther and farther, and delayed it until it happened in January of 2010-ish, kind of around that area. One, for instance, was an event that happened so long ago and wasn't really isn't that newsworthy and talked about and discussed in history books and so forth, the Falkland Islands attack, that most people don't remember it. But there was an event that happened in the 80s when Argentina attacked the Falkland Islands and tried to take it over. And according to Benjamin Creme's own master, it was a deliberate result of the forces of darkness to delay Maitreya's interview on TV. Now, the reason why I'm thinking it with this case is because it's the same thing. I think that Maitreya probably was getting ready to take a closer stance with humanity in some way, and the forces of darkness knew it, and they used this opportunity in the Middle East to delay it, is what I think. That's just my humble opinion. I don't know whether it's true or not, but that's just my opinion on it. It's been said that the Axis powers of World War II were the resurfacing of an ancient battle, and were the manifestation of the Antichrist energy that was depicted in the Bible. the Nazis in Germany, the fascists in Italy, and the militarists in Japan. And then they were defeated but not destroyed, and then they reincarnated in the Pentagon in the United States and Eastern Europe around Yugoslavia and the Zionist movement in Israel. And the mayhem that's happened since then in just Israel has been catastrophic, to say the least, right? And I do think that they are very, 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 just as the Pentagon is, easily used by the forces of darkness for their own gain. And that's what I think happened. So hopefully that answers that question. But no, I don't think it's going to be that dangerous. So, alrighty. Now let's get on into the last portion of this. It's entitled A Blueprint for Sharing. Now, I do want to say this real quick. These articles, it's always better for you to read it yourself. You can by going to the Share International link and reading some of these articles online. If you want your own book, like I'm reading it from the Master Speaks Volume 1 or Volume 2, just depends on the article. You can get one of his books through Amazon. I left the link in the description for you too. Now, it's important also to understand something about me personally in this channel. People look to me to be like a channeler. No pun intended. Channeler. Anyway, channeling information coming directly from the masters and those kind of things. And I don't. I'm not a part of that group. I don't claim to have direct information from these masters. The information that I'm giving is something that you could read yourself through one of Benjamin Creme's books. Now, I've studied this information perhaps longer than you. I've had perhaps a little more experiences with these masters than you that kind of give me a little bit more faith in this information, but that's about it, right? But it's important also to understand something about the intention of this channel is that it really is about the priorities of these masters, the priorities of the teacher, which the first priority is sharing. Nothing's going to happen until humanity learns to share. So he discusses the concerns that you might have about hearing the word sharing, and then he talks about how it should look, and then eventually what will happen when we do start to share. So hopefully you'll listen to it all the way through. A Blueprint for Sharing by Benjamin Creme's Master. When men consider the principle of sharing, they almost always see it in personal terms. They visualize a situation in which they personally will be expected to give away considerable sums of money to far-off people whom they do not know nor care to know. In fact, the principle of sharing can only be organized as a global process. There are several ways in which this can be achieved, either partially or totally. We, your elder brothers, consider that the following is the most practical, the simplest, and fairest method of all, one which, if adopted, would satisfy the greatest number. Each nation, we suggest, would be asked to make an inventory of all their resources and needs, what they produce themselves and what they are obliged to import. Then, each nation would be asked to put into a common pool that which they have in excess of their needs, forming a huge international resource from which all could draw. Naturally, the large developed nations would give a greater amount, but all would donate their unneeded surplus. This scheme appeals to us for its simplicity and fairness. It would, of course, take time to implement, but we foresee a time when it can be accomplished. Many are the trained organizers and administrators for whom this work would provide a welcome service to the world. All would proceed under the aegis of a master, or at least a third-degree initiate, to safeguard the trust of all. Thus, at a stroke, the curse of poverty and want would be ended. The hearts and lives of countless millions would be lifted with joy, and those who shared for the first time would find a happiness deep and satisfying which perhaps they were afraid to know. In this way only would be engendered the trust essential for the ending of war and terrorism. Without such trust, there will never be peace. Without peace, the future for mankind would be bleak indeed. Therefore, some form of sharing is essential if we are to survive. When the majority of men realize this, the major problems of the world can be solved. The principle of sharing is beginning to enter the minds of men throughout the world. Bit by bit, inch their way to this conclusion. Maitreya reminds all who hear him that sharing alone provides the solution to our troubles. Thus, as the weeks and months go by, men can be seen to grapple with their problems and more find sharing to be the key to their take future. Action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.